Have you ever seen someone lose their composure over a balloon? I'm not talking about a bunch of balloons. I'm talking about one, the only one. Lonely, red, flying lightly in the sky, as if the universe were saying, "Look how easy it is to be happy." That's right, the woman went crazy. And I'm not using the word freaked out lightly. She actually left the house as if she had witnessed a murder. And what did she see? A child about 6 years old, holding a helium balloon with a smile from ear to ear. But let's go back a bit. I moved to this neighborhood about 7 months ago. A neighborhood with almost twin houses, grass cut with a ruler, and people who check the height of your mailbox as if it were a national security inspection. And in charge of it all, we have the creature, the woman, the one who walks around with a clipboard under her arm as if she were the condominium general. At first, I thought it was funny. I thought, oh, okay, every neighborhood has its eccentric figure. That was naive of me. She wasn't eccentric. She was meticulous, obsessed, a veritable dictator of good suburban manners, and she made a point of reminding everyone of this on a daily basis. Until then, my only contact with this woman had been a flyer left on my door saying that my garbage can was 5 inches out of standard HOA alignment. 5 inches. I laughed. I threw it away and went on with my life. But this peace wouldn't last, because then the balloon of the apocalypse arrived. It was a Sunday afternoon. Nice weather, blue skies, and the neighborhood was miraculously quiet. A few children were playing in the block's square, the one that's a bit dull but has a bench that gets some good shade. And there he was, the boy, with his red balloon attached to a string, running in circles as if he were escaping gravity. And then it happened. The door to the woman's house opens with a bang. She emerges dressed as if she were going to an emergency meeting at the UN, marching towards the child as if to stop him before he pressed a nuclear button. I swear for a second, I thought she was going to confiscate the balloon. But no, she went straight to the boy's mother, with an expression on her face that seemed to mix disgust, fury, and a touch of, "How dare you defy my invisible rules?" She began to speak, loudly, with her hands gesturing as if she were invoking a decree of war. "Balloons were dangerous," she said. "It can kill turtles. It's a very serious environmental risk, and you're encouraging aerial vandalism." Yes, she really did use those words. The mother tried to argue that it was just a balloon, that her son was happy, that it was Sunday, that no one was hurt. But the woman was unyielding. She said she had already taken the matter to the HOA board and was working on a new regulation to ban unauthorized floating objects. I didn't even know that was possible. But there, at that moment, I knew this war was personal, because it wasn't just against balloons. It was against spontaneous happiness, against the simple, against lightness, against anything that couldn't be measured, regulated, or stuffed into an Excel spreadsheet. And then I realized I couldn't let it go, because today it's a balloon. Tomorrow it will be the sound of laughter. Then, perhaps, it will be the right to take a deep breath in the street without filling in a form. And that's when I decided, if this woman wanted a war against balloons, then I was going to give her the biggest war this neighborhood has ever seen. And I'm the type who doesn't do anything by halves. The decision was made the moment she pointed her finger at the sky and shouted with all the conviction in the world that that balloon was a threat to the environmental integrity of the neighborhood. She spoke with the seriousness of someone who had just identified a biological bomb in the playground. And the most absurd thing? Some people began to agree. Yes, some people scratched their chins and shook their heads as if she were revealing the conspiracy of the century. It was then that I realized that this woman wasn't just crazy. She was persuasive, and that was even worse. That same night, I went to sleep with a strange feeling in my chest. A mixture of anger, disbelief, and the desire to do something. But what? I could complain, make an anonymous post in the neighborhood online community, or even just ignore it and let it go. But the truth is that it struck me in a strange way. The idea of someone trying to regulate other people's happiness. monitor a child's laughter, control the sky. It disgusted me. It was more than just a neighbor's quarrel. It was a metaphor for all the insufferable people who think they can rule the world just because they make up rules and have free time. The next day, I went to the market. Not because I needed to buy anything specific, but because I knew that there, right at the entrance, was one of those sections with inflatable balloons, helium ones, the ones that float beautifully and make any human being with the slightest bit of soul happy. And I stood there, in front of the balloons, looking at all those dinosaur dolls, silver stars, shiny hearts, and birthday numbers, and I thought, what if there were more than one balloon? What if there were hundreds? And that's how it started. I called the only guy in town I knew who worked with children's parties, a guy called Dave, who was known for putting together themed decorations that looked like they were straight out of a carnival parade in Las Vegas. I asked if he had any balloons. He laughed. He said that if I wanted, he had enough balloons to fill a stadium. Perfect. I bought 300. Yes, 300. I paid cash, and I asked him to deliver everything on Saturday at 3 in the afternoon, right in the square of the block where the woman had made her public scandal. I spent the week in silence, just watching. She, as usual, did her daily patrols with her clipboard, writing down everything. Who left their garbage out after hours? Who planted a flower that wasn't on the HOA's authorized pallet? Who wore a different colored curtain? A veritable reality show of repression. She walked around the neighborhood with that "my word is law" aura, and her eyes half closed, as if she were hunting down sinners in the name of a decorated gospel. On Saturday, I woke up early. I drank coffee with a sweet taste of anticipation. That wasn't just a joke. It was a manifesto. At 2:30, I went to the square with a juice box, some snacks, and a picnic mat. I sat down like someone who wanted nothing. The children began to appear little by little, some on scooters, others on bicycles, some with their parents still upset about the previous scandal. And then the truck arrived. Dave climbed down with 2 assistants. Each of them was holding a bundle of balloons that looked more like a floating party cloud. And it went on and on. There were bags and bags, strings of colorful balloons, animal shapes, stars, emojis with their tongues hanging out, a walking sea of joy. The children went crazy. They started running towards the balloons as if it were Christmas, Easter, and Halloween all rolled into one. I handed each one out personally, one by one. Which one do you want? Star? Tiger? An emoji with sunglasses. The children jumped, laughed, shouted. Some didn't even know which one to choose. The parents? Well, the parents were overcome by the force of collective happiness. And at that moment, I saw a scene I'll never forget. A little girl, about 4 years old, hugging 2 balloons bigger than her, spinning alone in the middle of the square and shouting, "I have 2!" And that's when she appeared. First, there was the shadow, then the step, the clipboard, of course, and finally, the look. She froze on the sidewalk as if she had just witnessed a sacrilege. Her hands trembled. Her mouth hung open. Her eyes bulged. It was as if she was seeing an epidemic spreading there, in real time. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. She just stammered, pointed, trembled, until finally, in a burst of concentrated indignation, she shouted, "This is a violation of the regulations!" Someone on the other side of the square replied in mockery, "Which one? The one that says spontaneous joy is forbidden?" The woman then started shouting. She said she was going to call the HOA board, that she was making notes, that everyone there would be formally notified. But no one listened, no one called. The parents were taking pictures. The children were laughing like bells of freedom. And there, surrounded by 300 balloons, floating like dreams released into the air, she was just an angry woman, small, irrelevant, crushed by the beauty of simplicity that she tried so hard to suffocate. When she realized that no one was leaving, that no one was afraid of her clipboard, that the balloons were winning, she left, stiffly, with hard steps, like someone who has been defeated on a battlefield, where they have lost not only the war, but their reason. And me? I stayed there, sitting there, laughing inside, because that day I had won. And not with hatred, not with screams, but with balloons. The news of the balloons spread faster than gossip in a condominium group. The next day, I received more compliments than on my own birthday. Parents thanking me, children calling me the balloon magician, even people who had never spoken to me before started waving at me from afar with that complicit, "You did well" smile. But there was also the other side, of course. The silent side of the creature. She disappeared for 2 days. No rounds with a clipboard. No surprise visits to measure the distance between the pots on the balcony. The neighborhood went into a state of tense calm, as if everyone was waiting for the counterattack. And it came, because of course it did. On Wednesday, a letter arrived. And no ordinary letter. It was a laminated document with HOA letterhead, Arial 12 font, 1.5 spacing, paperweight that looked like it came from a government printing plant. The title was Formal Notification, Activity Potentially Harmful to Community Order. I swear on everything. It sounded more like an evacuation notice than a neighbor's complaint. I opened the envelope, and the letter began. Dear resident, we inform you that a complaint has been filed regarding the unauthorized event that took place last Saturday, involving the massive distribution of balloons. Massive distribution. As if I had fired tear gas into the neighborhood. It went on to say that this represented an ecological, visual, and potentially disruptive risk to collective well-being. Visual. The balloons were offending the lady's sensitive eyes. And to cap it off, it said that in the event of a repeat offense, disciplinary measures would be considered. I reread it 3 times. Each time it became more absurd. But it wasn't just the letter. She subtly upped the ante, like any good organizational psychopath. The following week, she started calling emergency HOA meetings, those meetings that nobody can stand, which always end with half a dozen pensioners arguing about what kind of fence should be allowed. Only this time, the focus was something else. Community event control policies. She wanted to create a system of advance approval, with forms, deadlines, mandatory supervision, and of course, everything would go through her desk, by her hand. It was the scam of the century, disguised as bureaucracy. I went to one of these meetings. I hid at the back of the room, just listening. And it was there that I saw the power of her speech. She spoke like she was saving the neighborhood from a colorful apocalypse. She said that the balloons were symbols of disorder, that Saturday's event had exceeded the limits of what was acceptable, and that it was time to re-establish the values of our home. There was even a moment when she compared the balloons to moral deviance masquerading as innocence. I almost burst out laughing. I swear, she was really comparing childish happiness with ideological libertinism. But what really worried me was seeing some people nodding in agreement. People who, until a few days ago, were in the square with their children, as if the woman had a hypnotic gift, an ability to manipulate fear with the rhetoric of an elementary school teacher in existential crisis. I left that meeting with one certainty: she wasn't going to stop. And if I wanted this story to have a real ending, I had to go further. And that's how the idea for the second attack came about. Only this time, it was more strategic. I was going to organize a community day of joy, an innocent event, with a picnic, games, chalk drawings on the ground, and, of course, balloons. Lots of them, but this time with an educational theme. That's right, I turned the balloons into educational material. One with the alphabet, another with the solar system, another with multiplication tables, another with the flags of the world. Because if the woman wanted to ban balloons now, she'd have to assume that she was against children's education. I started planning carefully. I spoke to some parents, and they all agreed. I spoke to a retired teacher in the neighborhood, and she loved the idea. She said she could bring booklets and set up a reading area. It started to take shape. Before I knew it, I had a Facebook group, a Canva logo, and even a list of donations, all registered, everything organized, because this time I was going to beat her with her own weapons: documents, structure, and legality. The day before the event, I received another letter. Guess who? This time, it used words like repeat offense, disrespect for HOA guidelines, and subversive initiative. Subversive. She was treating an afternoon with children drawing on the asphalt as if it were a coup d'etat. And, what's worse, she attached a petition with signatures. Not many, but they were there. Some people from the neighborhood who apparently preferred to live in an open-air museum than in a community with a soul. I kept the letter in a folder, not because I was afraid, but because it was already becoming a collectible. One day, perhaps, I would put together an exhibition of all that woman's administrative delusions, a museum of domestic oppression, sponsored by hatred of balloons. And then the day of the event arrived. Clear skies, beautiful sunshine, and children arriving with colorful backpacks, parents carrying fruit, blankets, coconut water, and the balloons? Ah, they came by van. A company specializing in educational events brought them all, with each balloon representing a theme. And I made sure they were biodegradable, because I knew she'd try to attack me on that side. I wanted to see her try to argue against a balloon with a world map made of recyclable material. And of course, she did, but this time without a clipboard, with her arms folded, standing on the sidewalk, watching, trying to find some flaw, some slip-up, but there wasn't. Everything had been thought out. Even the volume of the sound was within the permitted limits. Even the papers authorizing the use of the square were up to date, and she just stood there, watching, dying inside. Because this time, she knew I had won again. But what I didn't expect was what she would do next. Because a woman like her doesn't accept losing. She couldn't accept defeat. And it wasn't just one. It was two. Two public falls. Two events that she tried to destroy with the claws of control and was run over by something she simply doesn't know how to deal with: collective happiness. But a woman like her can't accept being defeated, much less twice in a row. And if there's one thing I've learned from living in this neighborhood, it's that the ego of someone who lives off controlling others never bleeds in silence. It screams, plans, and comes back thirsty. The week after our educational event, which, by the way, was an absolute success, the suspicious movements began. First, she disappeared for a few days. No patrols, no warning emails, no news signs with made-up rules like no barefoot on the sidewalk. Strange. Then there were rumors. Some of the more gossipy neighbors began to comment that she was meeting with the HOA board in closed meetings. Others said that she was trying to implement a sort of moral and visual safety commission. I laughed, of course, because it sounded like a joke. But then the first bombshell dropped. I received a new notification, but it wasn't a letter. It was a notice of a special meeting of the HOA, with my name highlighted on the agenda. The reason: recurring behavior that disregards community code guidelines. That's exactly what you read. They called an official board meeting to discuss my behavior. The guy who handed out biodegradable balloons to children while a teacher told stories about forest animals. I was accused of creating disruptive events that encourage child chaos. They used those words: chaos, childish. And that's when I realized she didn't just want to ban balloons. She wanted to expel me. At the meeting, she returned to the scene with everything redone, wearing makeup, her eyes shining with a polished hatred. She began to speak as if she were a senator giving a speech against the fall of civilization. She used words like moral decay, community indiscipline, and ideological invasion through disguised recreational practices. Yes, she basically accused me of wanting to subvert the neighborhood order with pedagogical balloons. I stood there listening, trying not to laugh. But inside, my patience had run out. I no longer had the slightest interest in debating with someone who sees a picnic as a terrorist threat. When I was given the floor, I spoke directly. No beating around the bush. I said that what she was doing was institutional harassment, that I had the legal right to promote public events as long as I respected the rules, which, by the way, I did with surgical rigor. I showed her copies of the City Hall permits, lists of participants, photos of the balloons with eco-labels. I told her that what really bothered her wasn't the volume of activities, the waste, or the use of space. It was the fact that I had taken away from her what fed her soul the most: absolute control. But she didn't back down. She suggested that the HOA vote for sanctions, that I should lose the right to use the square for an indefinite period, that I be monitored. Yes, monitored. She suggested that cameras be installed around the square to monitor possible recurrences of unauthorized conduct. It was a complete delirium, a suburban dystopia straight out of the mind of someone who confuses playgrounds with headquarters. But do you know what happened? She lost. Again. Because this time, the residents were tired. Because their children were happy. Because the parents were relieved to see their children playing outdoors, without tablets or screens. Because no one could stand the feeling of living in a condominium where even smiling required written permission. And when the vote was opened, she saw it. She saw that she had lost control. She saw that the fear was gone. She saw that her clipboard, her regulations, and her threats were no longer worth anything. A few days later, the big break came. She resigned. She left the presidency of the HOA. Not officially defeated, of course. She made up some excuse, something about needing to step aside to look after her mental health, which, ironically, was exactly what she had been attacking in others all along. And then, silence. A silence that felt like peace. And since then, the square has become a new place, without fear, with picnics, laughter, dogs playing with children, parents drinking coffee in the sun. The balloons? They're always there. Sometimes 1, sometimes 10. And nobody freaks out anymore. Nobody threatens to fine a mother because her child has released a yellow balloon with a happy face. Nobody calls it chaos anymore. And if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like and a comment.